Oh, this is Purim. Excellent. Oh, wonderful. I enjoyed the one on Hanukkah so much. Really did. Good. Okay, good. Okay, so we're on Parshas Vayigash, and 250, and I'll tell you the part I want to do. A couple of parts here in the Ramban with you today. I'm not going to deal with the first part of the parsha right now, but actually, as you know, there's a back and forth between Judah and between Joseph, and there's a bit of diplomacy that Judah works in terms of trying to speak to Joseph to try to argue on behalf of getting back Benjamin. And then finally, Joseph reveals himself to his brothers, and they don't know what to say. And finally, they get used to what's going on. And Joseph says, "It's not your fault. This is God's plan. I'm here, and I'll go back and tell my father that I'm here. Okay, tell my father that I'm here, and you should bring him down." So we're going to pick up in chapter 46. I'm sorry, not 45. Might be bad. Chapter 45, where Joseph revealed himself. And in the first 10 sentences, he says, "I'm Joseph," and he says, "I'm Joseph, is my father alive?" They couldn't answer him. He says, "Don't be upset, you were the one who sent me down. You see me, and you see Benjamin." And therefore, they send back to the Pharaoh's palace, tells the people. And in verse number, we're going to move all the way through this chapter. Now that Joseph has revealed himself to his brothers and says, "There's still years of famine that are here, so go bring my father down here." So they do. So in let's pick up verse 21. They're heading back to Israel. So the sons of Israel did so, and Joseph gave them wagons by Pharaoh's word. He gave them provisions for the journey, agalot. He gives them wagons. And according to Chazal, by the way, the agalot were a symbol of the eglah rufa that Joseph had been studying with his father about what happens when a person is found killed and they don't know who it is.
Why do they keep changing these names?
Joseph and Israel and Jacob?
Yeah,
because they're both equal names.
Yeah, but why not?
That's a very complicated answer. Sometimes Israel is more of a personal name. Sometimes Jacob is more a personal name. Israel is more of a general name. It shows the entire unity of the people. But the names are used interchangeably, right? As opposed to Abraham becomes Abraham, right? Sarah becomes Sarah. Yaakov is a name that remains forever. So, as for example, the Beth Jacob schools,
yes,
right, which comes from the fact that Moses says to people, "Ko tamar lebeit Yaakov v'sagei lebnei Yisrael." Go tell the Beit Yaakov, the house of Jacob, and tell the Jewish people. And Chazal understand that to mean Bnei Yisrael are the men, Beit Yaakov are the women are called Beit Yaakov, the house of Jacob. That's why Beit Yaakov. That's why the girls' schools are called Beth Jacob. Because it's Beit Yaakov, Ko tamar lebeit Yaakov v'sagei lebnei Yisrael. But Moses says, God says, tell Moses, tell the people, speak to the Bnei Israel and speak to the house of Jacob, men and women. So they both use it interchangeably, but in this case, positive is men and women. So at any rate, they have the wagons that come back. He gives them different clothing. He gives Benjamin 300 pieces of silver, 5 changes of clothing, okay? And he sends all this food back with them to Israel. And in verse number 25, we'll do 25, 26, 27, 8 slowly. So, Vayalchu vayomer lehem al tergzu baderech. He told them, this is page 257. He said, don't become agitated or don't slow down along the way. Just keep going straight. Don't have any internal disagreements. Vayalu mi Mitzrayim. They come out from Mitzrayim. They come to Eretz Canaan. Yagva avihem. They tell him, Vayigid lo lemor. They tell him, Od Yosef ben Ichai b'chil Moshe b'chol Eretz Mitzrayim. They say Joseph is alive and he's in charge, ruling over the land of Mitzrayim. Vayafag libo. How do they translate Vayafag libo? Kilohem min lahem.
But his heart rejected.
His heart rejected it. Okay, what does that mean?
He couldn't believe it.
He couldn't believe it. So what happened to him? Well, let's go. We'll see in the Ramban. He saw all they told him all the things that Joseph told them. He saw the agalot. He saw the wagons that Sheshlach Yosef Lasei Doto. And Yaakov became revived. And he said, "I'm going to go down." And I'm going to go down and see Joseph before I die. So there are two things that happen. One, Jacob initially doesn't believe them, and then he sees the rest of the wagons and he's saved. And what do the brothers tell Father Jacob? What do they tell Father Jacob when they get back? They found Joseph. And he's the viceroy.
Yeah.
How much of the story do they tell besides that?
That's it.
That's it. Do they tell him how Joseph gets there?
No.
What do you say?
I don't think they would. After putting him through all that.
Right. So it says he tells them all that Joseph told to his brothers. So it's not clear how much he tells and how much he doesn't tell them to say. So it could be that if you go back to verse number, let me see where it is. If you go back to number 12, verse 12 and 13, on page 255. Behold, your eyes see as do the eyes of my brother Benjamin. I'm back on 255, verses 12 and 13, before we're earlier on. It says, after he tells his brothers, there's two long speeches he has to his brothers. Why don't we take a look at the whole thing? Maybe I should have done that first. Joseph says to his brothers, come close to me if you please. Let's go back 253, verse 4. Okay, Vayomer Yosef elachav gshunai levigash. He said, Ani Yosef achichem Hashem echad masihein. I'm the Joseph you sold, right? The one you sold down to Egypt. And now don't be upset. Al te'atzu vayichar beinechem kim echad masihein ki lemichol shlachani elkim lefnechem. God sent me down ahead of you to bring us sustenance. Gesh nastayim arav k'mekavar. It's 2 years of famine in the land. Yod chamesh shanim asher en chish v'katzir. Another 5 years which there's neither plowing nor harvest. Vayishlacheni elkim lefnechem lasum lachem shevit bards. God sent me ahead of you to ensure survival of the land, to sustain you from momentous deliverance. And now, no, you didn't send me down here, right? God sent me down. He made me a father to Pharaoh, a master of all his household, and therefore now, go up to my father and say to him, Go up and tell my father that come on down, because God made me master, God made Joseph master of Egypt, and come down and don't delay. You'll live in land of Goshen, and you, your sons, your grandchildren, your flocks, your cattle, all that's yours. And you will come down so you don't be 4 or 5 years of famine, you won't become destitute, you, your household, all that's yours. And therefore go tell my father, skip verse 12 for a moment, verse 13. Therefore, on verse 13, go tell my father all the greatness and all the wonders that happened to me, and bring my father down here. So now when the brothers come up and they tell Jacob, Father Jacob, everything that Joseph had spoken to them, what do they tell him? Do they tell him the first part of the speech? Right? Or do they only begin the part where he says in verse 9, go up and tell my father? Now, logic would dictate that they only told Jacob the second half. Right? Which is what you probably all feel, the gut reaction. So, does Jacob ever find out what really happened? Of course.
Of course.
How would Jacob find out what really happened?
He would ask, what happened? How come?
How'd you become...
Yeah, how did you become viceroy? I thought you were dead.
How did you plunge into Egypt? Right?
Yeah.
Okay, and did they tell him?
Why didn't he ask Joseph?
That's another question. Does he ask Joseph? It's a question that really has no definitive answer.
Yeah.
Do you get the impression that Jacob knows from here on in of what happened? You have no reason to suspect that he knows what really ever took place.
Yeah. I find in today's time that when a person is successful, they don't ask him how he got his money. They just feel, oh, this guy's a very successful builder.
Well, they'd rather not ask.
They don't ask him.
From nowhere. If your son all of a sudden, became a successful builder after not seeing him for 20 years.
He's not a successful builder. He's a successful member of nobility.
Yeah.
Right? He's the king's viceroy. Now, question: how often does Jacob really get to see his son Joseph once he goes down? So does he have to make a special audience? Can he simply walk in, walk out? He has to be, Joseph has to take him to introduce him to Pharaoh. He doesn't have an open door.
Right.
So there may be somewhat of a stilted relationship that's never really healed. And it's possible that Jacob never really finds out the story of how Joseph was sold there. He understood that he was sold. It's clear he was sold down to Egypt. But how did he get sold? I mean, well, how would he get there? The answer could be on his way up to Dothan. Remember, Father Jacob sends Joseph, go find your brothers, and he never comes back.
What were they brought back?
They said, we found the coat.
Yeah.
So he got ripped, they thought it was. So he got ripped and he escaped. So they found the coat, or he was sold, and the coat remained behind. Someone grabbed him, and the last that Jacob sees Joseph is that he sends Joseph away to go see his brothers. So he doesn't know at which part of the journey Joseph falls into trouble. We know it happens to be when the brothers sell him. He gets to see the brothers. But it's just as logical that before he met the brothers, he was grabbed by an animal, he escaped from an animal, had to run away, he was sold, he was caught, he was grabbed, he was kidnapped, and sold down to Egypt. That would be the normal sequence of events, because how could the brothers actually sell him? It's pretty clear the brothers aren't going to tell the father Jacob. There's no reason to suspect that Father Jacob found out any other way, so it's possible he never found out. Okay, now we'll show you one part in the parsha where it looks like that he may have known about it. But I'll save that for the end.
And why doesn't Hashem
tell
prophesize,
Jacob?
though? Why doesn't he tell him?
So why does Jacob not know about this?
Yeah, why doesn't he?
So the question is, why all these years
Does he want to know?
Well, the question, why all these years does he not know what's going on? So one of the answers is the fact that he was, to receive a nevuah, you have to be in a state of happiness. Jacob is in a state of sadness because he's lost his son, the son who he's connected to, this universal special connection. So when that happens, he's unable to be in a position to be ecstatically happy to receive communication from the Almighty. Or else God does not want to reveal it to him. It's part of the plan. So I mean, it sounds unusual, but what would have happened if Jacob had found out that the brothers had sold Joseph down to Egypt? What would have happened in Jewish history? What would he have done to them? I don't know.
And
He
these
could
are
have
our
cursed
leaders.
them.
And these are our leaders.
Well, okay, so they're your leaders and they're not perfect, okay?
They're not perfect.
But Jacob would have said something horrendous about them. Instead of blessing them at the end of Sefer Bereshis, he would have cursed them.
Exactly.
Right? He curses Shimon and Levi because of their anger. He would have cursed them all for selling their own brother.
Their own brother.
So the Ramban actually suggests that what happens here is Jacob never ever finds out. Okay, and that's the fascinating Ramban that I want to share with you.
Right. It has to be like that, because if you had found out, it's exactly what you said. All these things would have happened. And then the history.
Here's Hebrew, here's English. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Oops. There's an English one. You want the English? Yeah. I got a Hebrew or English, sorry, okay. I left you one behind.
Okay, I'm just thinking that maybe Yaakov, given that he's seeing Yosef in a position of power, and not just that, but it's a position of power that saves them because of the family, says that, okay, it's a couple of brothers, like Yosef said, and so the brothers acted with respect to brothers. In other words, they may have been wrong, but they didn't.
Okay.
They did something as directed by Hashem.
So he would have understood it was directed by Hashem. Possibly. Well, Joseph understands that. It's clear that it is. So he would have made peace with it. In other words, it's possible he would have made peace with it. It's possible. But what the Ramban says, it's a risk that the brothers were not willing to take.
Right.
And in fact, you get a sense of how change can affect Yaakov just by the event when they tell Father Jacob that Joseph is alive. So what we read the psukim before, his heart rejected it. Right? And what actually happens? So the Ramban suggests that he actually falls into a stupor. He falls into he has like a stroke. He has like a faint spell. He lies prone for half a day until they keep telling him Joseph is alive, and finally snaps out of it. And this kind of news for an older individual whose circulatory system and pulmonary system and all the systems may be not working 100%, might have been too much, right?
Yeah.
Right. You often hear about, do you have to tell an older person about a close relative that died? The answer is you don't have to tell them. Oh, they should be sitting Shiva. There's no mitzvah to sit Shiva. The mitzvah is if you hear them, you know about a person, a relative who you have to sit Shiva for, you have to sit Shiva. Right? My mother-in-law was 101 when she died. She lost a sister the year or two before she passed away, a younger sister. We never told her. There's no reason to tell her. There was no reason to tell her. And you hear that again and again and again. So, and you know what? As she got older and she got a little more tumult, she didn't ask about her sister. The sister who lived in England for all these years. They were separated by 60 years. They would come now and then to visit, but
you hear this about all the people who have illnesses or something.
Right.
Why tell them when they're
correct? Yeah. Okay. Anyway, let's take a look at the Ramban. Maybe we'll take a look at the Ramban in verse 26 first. Okay. This is chapter 45, verse 26, and we'll go 26 into 27. Okay. 26. You have it 45, 26. 45, 26. It should be, how are we doing here with these Roman numerals? 46 should be LXVI. Oh, this is Mikate. It's going to be Vayigash. It's going to be after Mikate. It's going to be here. It's going to be Vayigash. It's got to be LX. This is 45. What did I say? 45, 26. What did I say? 46 is 45, 26. 45, 26. This is 45. And this is probably next page. 24, 25. 24, 26. Okay, Vayafa Glibo. Okay, page 539. Okay, you have 45, 26? I'm sorry? Vayafa Glibo. Says Ramban. Nechlaf Libo, that is, according to Rashi says Nechlaf Libo, and what happened? V'halach milhamin, and he refused to accept the words of that the brothers had told him. So Rashi interprets the word vayafag as it went away, or it rejected, which means lo haya libo ponel advarim. His heart, his emotions did not turn to the words they said, and Rashi brings down certain words that seem to be this, lashon b'figim and mein hafugod. I'm not going to read all the examples, but according to Rashi, the interpretation of the word vayafag libo is that he rejected what they said. Okay, v'enenu nachon, and Ramban says, skipping to the next paragraph, you have a paragraph there, it's not correct, or maybe they don't have a paragraph there, it'd be bad. Okay, v'enenu nachon, it's not a correct, says the Ramban. Okay, this interpretation of Rashi, it simply means he rejected. Okay, lashon puga, the word vayafag means shvita ubitul. Shvita means to stop. Like today in modern Israel, a strike is called a shvita. Bitul, to nullify. Kamo al titneni pugalach. And the Ramban gives a number of examples. I don't want to go through all the examples. The Ramban proves that this word vayafag libo means, I'm going to skip down about 2 lines. Vayafag libo shenit patel libo paskan nishmatel. The word vayafag libo doesn't mean he rejected it, but he stopped. It was such a shock that patel libo, his heart became nullified, it stopped. Paskan nishimatel, and he stopped breathing. Kipaskat, or it actually stopped physically, looked like he's breathing. Kipaskat that the heart stopped. He was like dead. He had basically like a heart attack. He had a massive heart attack, stroke, not clear what it was, but he falls into a swoon. The news is too much. So according to Rashi, he rejects what they say. It's very, very classic, very simple. According to Ramban, it's much more. It says Ramban, you know what? This is really what happens. This is what happens, that if you tell someone too much happy news right away without warning, that they can faint. V'huzkar b'sefer refuot, and it's mentioned in the books of refuah. Remember, Ramban is living in the 1200s. Ki lo yisbelu zeh zakenim v'chalushei hakoach. The zakenim, the elders, and the weak people can't accept this, can't survive this, so to speak. What happens? She'talfu rabbi mehem b'volem simcha b'pet b'tom. When they hear good news, happy news, they fall into a vayitaleit. They fall into a faint. They fall down suddenly. They hear get good news. Because the heart opens and closes. In other words, I guess the blood vessels become dilated, and the heart is not able to pump in a normal rhythmic fashion. The Ramban tries to explain in his knowledge of modern medicine in those days that the internal heat of the body spreads around. In other words, it probably means the circulatory system dissipates, and the heart can't take it, and it gets too cold, and it stops. In other words, the heart can't pump through the body. The electrical impulses become erratic. So this is what happens. V'hinei nafal zaken kimeit, and the zaken refers to Yaakov, falls down like he's dead. V'amar ki lohem in lohem, and it says he didn't believe them, which means lahagid, to tell shamad zman gadol min hayom. A long time took place during that day. V'hu shochev domein bavur shelo min lahem. He's lying flat and prone, with no unresponsiveness, because he didn't believe them. He didn't believe them, and he showed this by being unresponsive, by kind of just flattening out. Because it's known when people fall into this kind of stupor that they yell at them and they scream at them and they give them all kinds of happy news until they come back and quietly. So by repeating the words to them, the brain is able to process it, because even if the heart may not be beating perceptively, the brain is still processing hearing. And that's why it says, "Vayidabru elav et kol divrei Yosef asher divrei lehem vayardu galot." And that's why they told Yaakov all the things that Joseph said. They showed him the wagons. Why? What do you mean they showed it? Well, he did. Why did that help them? They were screaming into his ears the words of Yosef. What Joseph said, that I am the king and I am the viceroy and bring my father down. They showed him the wagons full of all the food from Egypt. Then he came back, he settled down, he came back, he awoke from his faint. And that's what it says, Vatachi ruach Yaakov avihem. And Yaakov became enlivened. Okay, so in other words, according to Ramban is trying to give you a pshat based upon what the reality is. When you tell another person unusual news, even though it's happy, they fall into a faint. The way to bring them back is not by giving them an electric shock. The way to bring them back is you keep telling them all the good news again and again, and eventually they will come back to life. So this explains what Vayafag means, and it explains why it says Vatachi ruach Yaakov avihem after they showed the agalot, and after they kept telling them about what Joseph told them. And that's why they had to tell him about what Joseph said. So the reason for this Ramban that I'm reading it to you, first of all, is to show you the Ramban had his finger or his pulse on what reality was. And second of all, because you see how difficult it was to share different news to Father Jacob, because what the reaction could possibly be. And Rashi simply says, no, they told him he didn't believe it. So why did he believe him later on? What changed? Ramban's pshat makes more sense. Now, one more pshat in this, then we'll get to 27. And according to Targum Unklis, doesn't mean that Yaakov became alive. What says Vatachi ruach Yaakov avihem means he got ruach hakodesh. He got back the ruach nevuah. When it says Vatachi, the spirit of Yaakov became alive, right? Which makes a lot of sense. Now that he had the good news, right, and he finally understood the good news, he was in a positive attitude, and he was ecstatically happy enough to receive HaKadosh Baruch Hu's nevuah. Not because my pshat is wrong, but just because the Targum says this is the truth. V'darsh came in milat ruach, and this is why he gave his interpretation. Because it says, "Not saying Vatachi Yaakov avihem, but ruach Yaakov avihem." It doesn't say Vatachi Yaakov avihem, but Salminyan ruach Hashem Elokim alai. Like Yeshaya says, the Spirit of God is on me. Or many times, another place where it says, Hashem Elokim shlacheni v'rucho, send me and send me your Spirit. Or Moshe says, send me a person to replace me, ish asher ruach bo, a person who is a man of the Spirit. The spiritual means a spiritual person gets the Spirit of the Almighty. So therefore, Onkelos is not really arguing with the reality of the effects of what happened, simply just giving an additional point. When Yaakov comes to, he's able to receive Ruach HaKodesh. But all these years until then, he could not receive Ruach HaKodesh, he could not have Nevuah because he was in a state of continual sadness.
But now that he's got this Ruach, is Hashem exposing what?
So that's our next piece. Okay, that leads into the next piece. Okay, good. That's why we both go hand in hand. Okay, so the next one is Vaydabrui Lavet Kol Devrei Yosef. They tell Jacob all the words of Yosef. So what do they say? Yirali. So it seems to me, in other words, I can't really prove he says, but it seems to me al derech pshat, the simple meaning of the psukim are, and Ramban many times likes to give the pshat, because according to some of the medrashim, according to a number of the medrashim, Yaakov does find out that Yosef was sold by the brothers. There are medrashim which do say that. So, yes, so I don't know. Yes, there are medrashim that do say it. They quote it in the footnotes. I've never seen them. But in other words, the Ramban says sometimes I give you medrashim, sometimes I like the pshat. Pshat is that he never found out. Shlohu Gad Yaakov, who was never told to Yaakov, Kol Yomav. No one ever told him, he never found out. Medrashim like to bring legends, and legends sometimes are somewhat hyperbolic.
No, I understand, but he fainted because he had heard that his son was alive.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if they told him what would happen if what really happened?
Right.
Would he really faint or really get a heart attack?
Well, he would either get a heart attack or get very angry or very upset.
Yeah, I would think, yeah.
Right. So says the Ramban that he believes that Yaakov never found out. This is a theory. He can't prove it really, but he believes this is the pshat. Why? Ki achav machu Yosef. He never found out that the brothers sold Joseph. That's what he never found out his whole life. So what did he think? He thought he was wandering in the fields. We know he was lost until he found the brothers. The people who found him took him and sold him down to Egypt. Why does Yaakov never find out? The brothers don't want to tell Yaakov, their father, what their sin is. Because they were afraid that for their lives, they were afraid he'd get angry and he would curse them. Who wants to be cursed? Who wants to be cursed by Father Jacob? You know how important blessings are. Jacob gets the blessing from his father, but Jacob and Esav are each vying for the bracha. Noah curses his son Cham, and he blesses Shem and Yefes. Right, because of what Cham and Canaan did, where they emasculated him or they had relations with him when he was drunk. So getting a curse has a whole lot of significance in the versions of the Bible. As you see, Kasher Asag Keruven and Shimon V'Levi. As you see in the end of Sefer Breshit, when Yaakov gives the blessings, it looks like the blessing for Reuven, Shimon, Levi is actually anything but a blessing. He talks about all the negative traits. Pachas Kamayim, because Reuven switched the beds between Yaakov and Bilhah, between Bilhah and Leah. Or where Shimon and Levi went in and killed the people of Shechem. Was that valid? Was that not valid? What did the people of Shechem do wrong? What did they do anything wrong? Okay, well there are a couple. The people of Shechem, not about Shechem and Hamor's father, not about the prince and his father, who the prince wanted to keep Dinah and seduced her. What about the rest of the townspeople? They were kind of tricked into this having a bris milah, and while they were recuperating, Shimon and Levi killed them all out. It was a bad thing, right? Ramban, by the way, says the reason that they killed them is because one of the things that Bnei Noach has to do is set up a system of courts, and therefore they didn't set up a system of courts because they should have judged Hamor and Shechem for doing this, which was wrong. That they kidnapped Dinah. Kidnapping is a societal sin.
Yeah, but the example is when Hashem got rid of the world, He didn't take the good ones from the bad ones. He took everybody, including the animals and everything.
So
what I'm saying is that when the Dinah incident happened, they didn't say, well, these are the good people, we'll just get rid of these guys.
Well, the only people
the whole thing,
right. Well, that's correct. But the answer is yeah. I agree. So it's not so clear that it was a good thing to do. But we're not going to talk about that. So anyway, so first of all, the brothers didn't want to tell Father Jacob because they were afraid for their lives and afraid he would curse them. As you see, he does curse Shruvain and Shimon Levi for some of the events that they did that Yaakov does know about. The Yosef b'musar tov lo ratzah lagid lo, and Yosef with his good manners and his whole positive attitude towards everything, and this may mean that just in general how he behaved, or it may have been that he understood, not just because he had good midos, but it may have been also he understood there was a purpose here. The whole purpose of his being sold down to Egypt, had a purpose from God. So therefore he didn't tell Jacob. L'kach nemar, and therefore it happens after Jacob dies. So the brothers come to Joseph, and maybe I'll read the Ramban and I'll show it to you so you'll understand it. Let's just read the Ramban. They come. I'm reading the Ramban, okay, but then I'll show it to you in the Torah. Yosef lemor avicha tziva lefnei moto lemor. The brothers come to Yosef after Jacob dies, and they say that your father told us, which looks like it's a lie. It's not really true, because ilu yodayo Yaakov binyan hazeh, had Jacob really known about this event, haya ra'ui lahem shechalu pnei avim b'moto l'savot et Yosef mipiv. They would have had that Jacob himself. They would have asked Father Jacob before he died that he should command Joseph directly to take care of the brothers. Instead, they come to Joseph after Jacob died and says, your father told us before he died that you should look after us. Which looks like it's a faker, which it is. He should look after them and not change his word. And if Yaakov had really known this, he should have called in Joseph to tell him to look after the brothers after he died, not to put the brothers in the fear they would be kind of in danger, and not to make up things on their own. And the case that the Ramban is referring to is, if you go back to your Chumashim in Parshat Vayechi on page 286. Jacob dies. Everybody dies, but Jacob dies in chapter 50. Right, this is the last chapter in the book of Bereshit, and they take him up to Canaan. They bury him, and they carry him in this is page 287. We got it. 287, verse number 12. So that they take him, they do as he instructed them. They took him to the land of Canaan, they buried him in the Machpelah, Mars Machpelah, the field that Avram brought. And then in verse 14, Joseph returns to Egypt, he and his brothers, If they buried his father, they all come back. And then verse 15. And the brothers saw that their father was dead. And they said, whoa, Luyas Demeni Yosef. Maybe Joseph will still hating us. And he's going to bring against us all the evil that we did to him. As long as our father was alive, he kept it to himself. He didn't want to make machlokes. But now that the father is gone, maybe he's now going to bring out all his hatred against us, for we sold him. So they instructed that Joseph be told. By Tzavur Yosef the mother, they instructed Joseph would be told. And it's very clear they're making this up. Your father gave orders before he died to say, Kotamuli Yosef, go tell Joseph, please forgive the spiteful deed of your brothers and their sin, for they've done evil. And now this is what your father said. And now, now please forgive the spiteful deed of the servants of your father's God. And Yosef cried. Okay, and they went and they threw themselves before Joseph, and we're slaves to you. And Joseph says, don't worry, I'm in place of God. This was God's idea. This is all the mission of God. Don't worry about it. This is clear that the brothers make this up, right? Because the father is not there, and they're concerned without the father to interfere, the father to be the neutral ground. Joseph now may kind of go back to all the revenge he wanted for all these years. It is clear that Father Jacob never knew about what happened. Because he would have done it directly. He wouldn't have waited for himself to be dead to say, the brothers have to say, your father said. And Joseph very clearly understood what's going on. Right.
Well, you were speaking earlier about if he had found out, he would have cursed him.
Yeah.
But I think the curse is already there in your soul, because you carry that around forever in your wherever you go. It doesn't matter how much people will tell you, I forgive you. Yeah. It doesn't. You can never forgive yourself for something you did like that. Okay. And therefore, the Possibly. Fact that the father gives them a beracha anyways. Yeah. But the curse is inherently in there already.
Yeah. Okay.
But
But they didn't want to get cursed. So therefore, according to Ramban, it is clear in his mind, despite some Midrashim that seem to say that Jacob did find out about it eventually, that that he did not find out about it. That according to Pshatis, he did not.
Some things are best kept quiet. Is that the idea?
Probably, especially at that point in the
Because
game.
what's the point of telling him that?
Yeah.
He fainted when it was good. When it was good news, then you can imagine bad news.
Great. Okay. Good Ramban. Got time for another one. It's a long one.
Was he a doctor, by the way?
Dr. Yosef?
Ramban.
Yes, yeah. Rambam was. Ramban was a philosopher. He was a scholar. He may have been a doctor.
No, but he's talking about all these.
He's referring
the
to
heart and the movement of the blood and
I think people. It's like, I don't know. You and I know the same thing. That based upon medical knowledge, you want to be careful how you tell someone. You say all the constraints. This was common.
Yeah.
Right. You better, be careful. If you have to tell someone bad news, you're careful how you say it.
But how do you say it when a rabbi comes to your house and says your father passed away?
Well,
how is that handled?
How is that handled? Very gently and you first of all you tell the person to sit down.
Yeah.
The fact that the rabbi shows up at the house is already the person begins to think something is not so good.
That's right.
And they begin trying to figure out how bad the situation is. So by the time that you share the news, the person has already been prepared to hear the worst, which it is. So the way the people do it, if your rabbi do this, is you kind of share the news in ways that makes the brain begin to think this out, what's about to come down before they hear it. So the brain is already processing that as a possibility, though it's rejecting it because the brain never likes to accept bad news. When the news is delivered, it's still going to be difficult, but the brain is already one step ahead of the hearing. Yeah. That's usually the way it's done.
Yeah.
It's never easy to do this. Okay. Now, this Ramban is really a great Ramban. They're all great Rambans.
You like Ramban?
I love Ramban. Okay, I love Ramban. This is in chapter 46, verse 15. 46, chapter 46, verse 15. The story itself is not really the Joseph story. It's really the enumeration of the Jewish people. But the Ramban is going to show us a miracle that the Bible refers to, like the Bible does not refer to. The Ramban is going to put down a very important premise about the types of miracles the Bible recounts and the types that they don't mention. Okay. Some of the calculations in this Ramban are a little complex. We may not do all of them, but you'll see very clearly if you don't get down to the last number, single digit, you'll understand in generalities what's going on here. What page? Chapter 46. Chapter 46, verse number 15. Okay. Ela b'nei Leah. Okay. Okay. So this is just to understand what's going on here. Right. So in the Chumash first, perhaps, just chapter 46 really is about Jacob finally going down, and they hear the news. He's recuperated from hearing the news. They all pack up. They begin to go down, and in chapter 46 you have the enumeration of the Jewish people, which begins in verse number 8, and at the end of verse 27, the Torah tells us all the people that come down to Mitzrayim are 70. Kol hanevesh haba Mitzrayim hashivim. The total number, so from 70 people that come down with Jacob, we end up having 600,000 that come out from Egypt 210 years later. That's because of phenomenal reproduction and growth, which Chazal tell us about.
Possible?
Is it possible? So Chazal say in the beginning of Shemot that the Jewish people gave birth to sextuplets. So if every generation is sextuplets and they got married at a fairly young age, it's possible. Why is it not possible? Okay. 6 children at a time. Can you imagine? Yeah. Right. Okay. There's a family. I'm trying to think. My mother-in-law had about 50 great-grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Wow. So that's one person. So you multiply this times 70. I don't know, and you keep multiplying. Multiplying over the course of years. At any rate, it's 70 altogether. And if you go back to the sons of Leah, and this is where Rashi makes his comment, and Ramban's going to point this out. So the sons of Leah, in verse 15, that were born to Yaakov in Padan Aram, and plus Dinah. All the numbers of the sons of Leah are Kol Nefesh Banav Notzav 33. So Rashi points out, and all the Mefarshim point out, that if you go back and count all the descendants of Leah that are listed, including Dinah, you only end up with 32. And the Torah is not that poor in mathematics and arithmetic. So Rashi says, this is Yocheved, who was born on the way down to Mitzrayim. Yocheved, the mother-to-be of Moshe. And Rashi used the term Yocheved was born Bein HaCholmot B'Knisasam La'ir. As they're coming into Egypt, as they're coming in on the way, they're traveling through the gates, through the entrance to the city, Yocheved is born. And it says, Asher Yolda, how do you know? Because it says, Asher Yolda LeLevi b'Mitzrayim, that she was born to Levi in Mitzrayim. Now here, so she was born in Mitzrayim, but she was not conceived in Mitzrayim. This is how the Medrash understands Yocheved. So she's born in Mitzrayim. In Bamidbar, where we're listing genealogy of Moshe, we're told that Yocheved was born to Levi, the daughter of Levi, in Mitzrayim. Okay, but she was not conceived. So therefore, in listing the people who are coming down with Jacob from Canaan, it's 32 descendants of Leah. When they reach Mitzrayim, as they come into Mitzrayim, as they enter into the city gates or the country gates, so to speak, the border crossing, so she is born, she makes it number 33, and therefore the numbers jive. Okay? Now the Ramban has a long discussion and accepts this medrash, which many commentaries accept, but the Ramban has a long discussion which says if this is really true, that Yocheved is born as they come into Mitzrayim, and we know how long they are in Mitzrayim, how old was Yocheved when she gives birth to Moshe? So let me do the math very quickly, because it'll save us going through all the calculations of the Ramban. Okay, they're coming down, how many years are they actually in Egypt before Moses takes them out? 210. Would you say 430?
No, I said 207.
210. It's 400 years back to the Brit Ben Abtarim of Abraham, but 210 actual years in Egypt itself. How old is Moshe when he takes out the people from Egypt? Well, that's a hard question, but how old is Moshe when he dies? That should be an easy question. How old is Moshe when he dies? 120. How many years are they in the wilderness? 40. So how old is Moshe when they come out? 80. Okay, which by the way means there's a large gap in the life of Moshe that we don't know about. Because he kills the Egyptian and he's forced to run away. You have to fill in a gap of 80 years when he comes back. Because the whole story with taking the Jews out of Egypt with Pharaoh is a year. It's a different plague every month. There are 10 plagues, 10 months. So what happens for the period of time when he hits the Egyptian? We'll assume he's 20, 25 or something. He goes out the first time to see his brethren. What happens in those intervening 40 years or 50 years? We don't know. There's a lot of midrashim talk about it, but it's a gap that's not important because he does nothing of significance. He's living with Jethro. When he finally finds Jethro, was he in Jethro all the time?
He's studying, he's learning.
He's studying, he's learning. It's not clear, okay? There's a lot of midrashim. But the bottom line is, we know that Moshe is 80 years old, therefore when he takes out the Jewish people from Egypt. Which means, here we go. So you agree that Moshe is 80 years old when they leave Egypt? Because he dies when he's 120, and that's at the end of the 40 years. That's simple. How many years are they in Egypt? 210. If Yocheved is born when they come right into Egypt, as they enter into the gates, how old is she when she gives birth to Moshe? 130. And we know that Yocheved is the daughter of Levi, because the Bible tells us, Mamidbar Yocheved Asher Yodol Levi b'Mitzrayim. So therefore, says the Ramban, the obvious question, if Yocheved is 130 when she gives birth to Moshe, isn't that a miracle?
Sarah was, how old?
90.
Okay.
But the Bible makes a big deal about it. Now, it doesn't make a big deal about Yocheved.
It's second now, yeah.
Wait a minute, if it happened once, it can happen again. But this is even older. This is 50% as long. 90 times 2 is it's 130. So the Ramban's basic answer is going to be, this is a truism, that when miracles happen, not every miracle that happens is recorded by the Bible. Which miracles happen? The ones that are clear and overt, like splitting of the sea. The ones that the Navi says will occur. The one that there's a record, the Almighty says, this will take place. Moshe, raise your hand and the sea will split. Raise your staff and the sea will split. Moshe, tomorrow, go back and tell Paro, tomorrow will be plague, frogs, lice, blood, whatever it is. That's the miracle that occurs that's so clairvoyant. It's a nes nigla and it's predicted to take place. That's the key. But there's tons of other miracles that the Bible doesn't record, because that's just what biblical life was all about. And the Ramban tries to show you that this idea of giving birth at late age, which is miraculous, right, does not recorded by the Bible. And there are other examples as well of where this takes place. So this is an important value to tell us that that living long or giving birth at late age, which is a miracle, as you see it was for Sarah, is not the only miracle that takes place. So it's a long Ramban. We'll try to do most of it, but I think you've got the key, even if we don't do all of it. Okay, it says the Ramban. Shloshim v'shalosh is the Ramban in verse number 15, 46:15. 15. Okay. 46:15. This is about hidden miracles. Okay.
Yeah. When we speak about some of the older ones, like Methuselah, for example.
Well, everybody lived the same age then.
No, but 900 years.
Yeah.
So he must have had children when he was 800, let's say.
Yes, he did. Yes, true. But then things change. So when Sarah gives birth at age 90, that's actually a miracle. When Yocheved gives birth at age 130, it's also a miracle. Now you could argue that maybe it's not. Okay, Shaloshim v'shalosh. What page you on? You found the page?
542.
542. 542? Okay, 542. So the Ramban quotes Rashi. The Rashi says you're really only 32 years, 32 people, not 33. This is Yocheved was born as they enter into the city or the boundary or the boundary of Egypt. As it says in Bamidbar chapter 26, in recounting the genealogy of Moshe, that she was born, Yocheved, it was his mother who was born to Levi in Egypt. Her birth was in Egypt, but her conception was not in Egypt. Zui Shitat Rabbeinu, this is the version, this is the opinion of the rabbis in the Talmud, the Medrash, that Yocheved is born here. For Rabbi Avram, you know how the Ramban doesn't like the Ibn Ezra. Rabbi Avram, the Ibn Ezra Heshiv, and the Ibn Ezra says, Vamar Kizet Teimo, this is very difficult to accept. This is hard to understand. Imkain Lama Lo Hiskir HaKatuv HaPela Shnasi Mag Sholidad Moshe V'hi Bat Shleimah V'Shoshim Shana. How come if she's born at this point and she's 130 when she gives birth to Moshe, how come it's not mentioned? Look, we know about the birth of Moshe. We're told, why not simply say that there was a great miracle that she was 130 when she conceived and gave birth? Why only mention Sarah who's 90 years old? Not only is it so difficult for us, but you see that there are piyutim, which we don't say, but there are piyutim who made her even longer. There was a piyut that they would say on Simchat Torah, maybe we still say it, which is about Moshe Rabbeinu. It says, Yocheved imi acharai hitnachami, that Moshe is saying, Yocheved, my mother, when I'm gone, please give consolation about me. Vehinei hi bat 250 shana. And according to that, she would be 250 years old. In other words, according to this piyut, this liturgy that was sung on Simchat Torah, one of the lines says, Yocheved imi acharei hitnachami. It's a rhyme. Yocheved imi, Moshe is saying, my mother Yocheved, after I've gone, please give consolation about me. That would mean that if Yocheved outlives his own mother, if Yocheved outlives her own son, Moshe, and Moshe is saying, when I die, my mother, please be consoled about me. So if she's 130, according to the Paitan, she's going to be 250 with the death of Moshe. And the same thing comes up, and when it says that Achia Shiloni lived for many years as well in the Agada, it's B'dever Agada Ohim Yachid Ad Kan Daito. But that's just Ramban. That's the Ibn Ezra says that's just the Agadato that we don't accept about Achia Shiloni. But in other words, it becomes fantastic. This is such a difficult medrash to assume. The Ibn Ezra says I don't accept it. That's ridiculous. Now, the piyut in her hyperbole, the piyutim that we add on different Yom Chagim, of which we have on Simchat Torah, that Moshe is enunciating thanks to his mother, and he even says, "My mother, when I die, you will eulogize me." Right, is a hyperbole of what really takes place, and I can't accept that as the pshat. So the Ibn Ezra throws this out, because the Ibn Ezra wants to find real pshat. How can a person give birth at 130 and the Bible not recognize this? However, says the Ramban, I'm going to throw you out, Mr. Ibn Ezra. In other words, and how is it possible to be a wise person by going against the words of the rabbis? I got to answer back for the rabbis. You, Ibn Ezra, think you're so smart to chuck the medrash. You say it's ridiculous. I'm going to answer on behalf of the rabbis who say that Yocheved was born entering Egypt, which means she's 130 when Moshe is born. Ki al kol panim yeh habadvar Yocheved pele gadol min anisim hanistarim shem yisod Torah. It's true. It says, you're right. It's true that Yocheved has a great miracle, a great hidden miracle. One of the great hidden miracles that take place in the Torah, which are the foundations of the Torah. In other words, you don't have to reject it. Oh, the Bible doesn't mention it. I'll come to that in a moment. But in other words, okay, there are many miracles that are nisim nistarim. Kihi bat Levi atzmo, because she's the daughter of Levi. We're told she's bat Levi. So lo mityaches they love. Not that she is a descendant of Levi, she's a daughter of Levi, k'moshe katuv, as it says in Bamidbar, Asher Yoda Otal Levi b'mitzvahim. She's not just Bat Levi, because when the Bible refers to her in the beginning of Shemot, it says Vayelech Ish mi Beit Levi Vaykachet Bat Levi. That doesn't mean she is a daughter of Levi. It means she could be a descendant, many generations. But when it says in the Bible in Bamidbar Chavav, Asher Yoda Otal Levi b'mitzvahim, who was born to Levi in Mitzrayim, means that Levi was actually her father. V'yod Katuv. And also says at Yocheved Dodotod, refers to Yocheved, his aunt. If you say that Levi gave birth to her when he was younger, let's forget the medrash of coming into Egypt. You got two choices. Either Levi gives birth to her when he's young, so then if Levi gives birth to Yocheved when he's young, so then Yocheved's got to be an old lady when she gives birth to Moshe. V'im Yomar, and if you say, forget the medrash, maybe you'll say that no, Levi gave birth to Yocheved after many years in Egypt, so she was a normal age when she gives birth to Moshe, but Levi was old when he gave birth to her. It means that Levi gives birth to her when he's old. Because if you want to reduce the age of Yocheved and say that she didn't give birth when she's 130, so then what happens? You'll reduce her age, but then you're making Levi much older, so it's not going to work. So you make him v'huya ben me'ashana. You'll make Levi 100 years old. Because when Levi comes down to Mitzrayim, she is 43 years old. And the Ramban has a calculation to figure this out, how Levi is only 43 years old. We're not going to go into it, it's a little complicated. It'll be two wonders. He'll be as old as Avraham was when Avraham questions whether he can give birth. If Levi is 100, so Avraham raised the question, how can I give birth when I'm 100? Or it says, Vadoni Zokain, where the Sarah makes fun of her husband. He's an old guy, but he's a Kainah Beledet Moshe Batayin Gimel. She'll still be old. She'll be 73. So in other words, you can reduce the age, but they're not going to be. They both can't be young. So if you say the Levi gives birth when he's at the very end of his life, so Levi will be even much older than Avram when this young Yocheved is born. So therefore, no matter how you slice and dice it, even if you don't have this medrash that she's born just coming into the walls, either Levi is a young person when he gives birth to her, so she's 130 when she gives birth, or Levi is a very old person, which will make him older than Avram is when he fathers this child of Yocheved. So something is a miracle. So how come? So therefore, it is a miracle. There are many miracles. So how come we don't have it mentioned? I'm going to tell you something that's really true and tried and correct and clear in the Torah. Here's where the Ramban points out what's mentioned and what's not. This is such a very important Ramban, which is Miracles that are said by a Navi who prophesies this will occur, who gives the prophecy before. O malach niglaba malachut Hashem, or an angel comes in the messenger message, and is a messenger for God. Yaskim Katuv. These miracles are referred to. But the ones that happen on their own to help a tzaddik or to get rid of a rasha, they're not mentioned. Not every miracle is mentioned. And this is going to be like boiling gold to stuff up the mouth of the Ibn Ezra, really what he's saying. In other words, that's what he's really saying. Okay? Let me see how they translate it here. This is burning gold is a quote from that to this Chacham, to everything that he asked against the rabbis, against the Chazal. He's referring to Ibn Ezra. Mimash Yeshiva Rabotenu Binyan Pinchas, what he asked about Pinchas, that according to the discussion comes as Pinchas going to be Eliyahu. According to the Medrash, Pinchas is the same person that Eliyahu is. The Ibn Ezra says that's not possible. How could a person live from the time of Pinchas all the way to the time of Eliyahu Navi? How could it be the same person? No, the ages don't match up. It's too long. And the answer is, guess what, buddy? There's a miracle. And this is really true in a number of other places. So in other words, if you want to know that every time the Ibn Ezra says things don't make sense, it can't be, it's not possible, the Bible doesn't call it a miracle. It is a miracle. The Bible doesn't have to tell you it's a miracle. Okay? And why does the Torah have to mention all these miracles? All these basic foundations of the Torah are based upon hidden miracles. The life of the Jewish people, this nation, in other words, this nation who keeps the Torah, the Am Torah, lives a life that's based upon nisim, not nature, not minhag olam. The promises of the Torah, the promise that God makes to the future of the Jewish people is also something that's supernatural. That even the laws that God gives to us, that if we break them, we get punished, this is unnatural. Because in derech hateva, the normal natural ways, if a person has relationships, illegal relationships, the person shouldn't die. Or if a person eats forbidden fats or forbidden meats, he shouldn't die. And when God says, if you don't keep the Torah, the heavens will be like barzel, like iron. They'll be gray. There'll be no rain. That doesn't happen with Tivam. Mipnei Zareinu, because we didn't plant B'Shana Shvi, because we did plant in the Shemitah year. All these punishments, the Torah says, are not natural. V'chein kol yidei Torah v'tavotahem. And the same thing with all the promises of good, not just the punishments, but all the promises of good the Torah gives to us. V'chol atzlachot tzaddim b'tzidkatam, and all the success of all the tzaddikim in their righteousness. V'chol tefilot David Malkeinu, and all the prayers of David HaMelech, v'chol tfiloteinu nisim v'neflos, and all his tfilos are nisim and neflos, are miracles. El she'ein b'hem shinim u'fursam b'tivo shalom. But all of these cases don't really change the veracity and the existence of the ways of the world. Kasher, Hizkarti, Zakvar, as I've talked about, and I'll explain again in the future. So therefore, in other words, all these ideas of the normal sequence of events happening, when there's a tweak in nature that's a little bit out of the ordinary, the Almighty doesn't have to do this to us. And the same thing he proves that the same thing comes up with other examples he gives about how the judges were, the age of the judges were in the time of the Shoftim. Maybe we'll just kind of tell you like a little bit outside. That when it comes to the giving birth of these four judges, there were four judges who lived one after the other: Salmon, Boaz, Oved, and Yishai. There's all the way down to the birth of David. Each of them has to live and give birth within a space of about 73 years on the average. So either you assume that each one gives birth when they're 73, because Salmon gives birth to Boaz, Boaz gives birth to Oved, Oved gives birth to Yishai, and then the next one is David. So to kind of go through the genealogy all that way down, you've got to multiply 73 times 4. So either they each give birth when they're 73, which are all old people, or else if one person gives birth when they're younger, you've got to balance out that the other three are going to be older. Or if two are younger, the other two become older. So in other words, how come that doesn't mention anything anywhere? How is it we come up with a genealogy of David that his ancestors were all old people when they gave birth? The answer is, that's just the way it is. So in other words, that's not just such a miracle. And the same thing is that when you come to actually Avram, gives birth as well. What was the case? And I'm just going to move ahead to where it says a Kfar Pirashti. I'm not sure where you can find. Let me find it in the English to you. So I just want to get to the key parts of this piece. Over 46. What do we say we are? 46, what, 46, 15? Okay, that's it, okay. Right, okay, this is, I'm on page 558. Okay. Ukfar Pirashti. Ukfar Pirashti ki apela bi Avraham eno kasher yachshav v'chacham. Let me see if I can find it for you. Okay. I'm just skipping over the part about the ages of Ruth and the ages of all the others. Here we go. It's right near footnote 78, 79, middle of the page. Okay, Ukfar Pirashi. So in other words, there's another case which the Torah didn't get so excited about the delayed ages of the Shoftim. And here, Ukfar Pirashi, ki apela b'Avram, the wonder with Avram, eno kasher shov v'chacham aniskar v'zulo tomi bali mikvah. It's not really what the Ibn Ezra thought it was, that Avram was an old guy when he gave birth. Ki Avram holidet Yitzchak termoto shivim v'chamesh shana, because Avram actually gives birth to Yitzchak, and he still lives another 75 years. So it's not such a great thing that Avram gives birth to Yitzchak when he's 100. That's no big deal, because he dies when he's 175. So he's still got 1/3 of his life ahead of him. Now think about us. A person lives till, what would we say, 80, 90. So therefore, for a man to give birth when he's 50 years old and sire children, it would not be that unusual. He's still got 40 more years. So therefore, what's the big deal that Avram was an old guy? He really hasn't reached the very end of his life. And men stop siring children, or men are not able to sire children when they become 3/4 of their lifetime, whatever that would be. So 60, 50, 70. As the doctors begin to tell us what are the different ages of young and older and getting older, Aish and Zikna becoming old. In our age, writes the Ramban, when people live 70 years old, this was the age expectancy in the days of Ramban, the people don't consider someone old until they're after 60. So they're not old till they're 60, they're 10 years before they pass away, and in the age of Avram, he lives 175, so that he can give birth to a child when he's 100, that's not such a big deal. I'm sorry?
Not a big deal.
It's not a big deal. It makes sense. So why is this such a big miracle? In other words, and we see that this giving birth when you're old is not a miracle. So this was even less of a miracle for Avraham. And also Avram gives birth to other children after Yitzchak is born. These are the ones he sends away. This is not the last child that Avram sires. It may be the last son that Sarah has, but he has other children. And therefore, if there's a great miracle that Avram is 100 when he gives birth, it should be a double miracle, triple miracle, multiple miracle when he gives all these other children. And if you say that he got back to his young age, there should be even a bigger miracle. There's no reference to it. And that's actually the opposite of what would normally be that in the normal range of events. And in other words, and it's known even in our age, says the Ramban, there are people who give birth to sire children, not women, but males who sire children until they're 70, and even until 80 years old, they're old. So what's the big deal about Avraham? I'm sorry?
There are people today that have children.
Correct, but we have a longer life expectancy in the day of the Ramban. Ramban was saying that the life expectancy of a normal person in his time was 70, but there are people who have longer who can sire children, so it's possible. So what's the big deal for Avram that he's 100 out of 175 when people can give birth to 70 out of 70 or 80 out of 80? So as we find according to Kafiyat Komein Bahem Alechut Lefit Tzuvamet. Lechut is the youthfulness, the moisture. In other words, that they are able to maintain their vitality according to their nature. V'gam Nashim Ein Lam Zman. Even women don't have a set time. V'cholot Hiyes Lam Orach Tilad. As long as they have their menstrual period, they can give birth. So what's the big deal about Avram and Sarah? Rakatemo bi Avram v'Sarah kasher pirash yisham. The real miracle of Avram and Sarah was mibnei shelo helidu b'nurehem. They did not give birth and were unable to conceive and have children when they were younger. It's not the age, but the fact that all those years that they were married, they have no children. They're childless. It means there's something really wrong. There's something defective, either the male or the female or both. All of fertility is either all infertility issues are either the male problem, female problem, or a combination. It's about a third. Now both of them together were able to conceive. And the greater miracle was even Sarah, who stopped her menstrual period. Because you can't go back on that. Once that finishes, the body goes into changes. It's called menopause. So therefore, the whole miracle here, first of all, for Avram, it was a different kind of miracle. Not that he was an old person, but that he was not able to conceive at all naturally. And after 100 years, God says, "I'm going to make it work for you guys." And if it's according to this, if Yocheved lives as long as her father did, Levi, and she maintains her vitality, means her menstrual period, until very late in life, like many women, some women do, it's not going to be such a great thing that she gives birth according to the age of the Medrash, which is 130 years old. So now why does it have to be that Yocheved is 130? Why not make another generation? This is just the last part of the Ramban. So she's 130. Levi, Yocheved, and then Moshe. Why not build the relationship? Levi, X, Y, Yocheved, Moshe. What's the big deal? So says the Ramban, here's why. This is all part of God's plan. Because God wanted to take the Jewish people out through the brothers themselves. God did not want them to be there. However, the gates did not come. God had to make them stay longer, or make them older, until that they were able to give birth. Really, God would have liked them to come out as quick as possible. But because they had a certain number of years that they had to be there, so God had to stretch out Yocheved's life to give birth to the Goel, the Redeemer. Not because of any other reason. If it could have been, God would have made her give birth to Moshe much younger, and they could have gotten out after 50 years. Yes. But God promised that there was a certain amount of time that had to be there. Okay? So this is according to the view of Chazal, that Yocheved was born coming into Mitzrayim, when Levi was still young and gave birth to the rest of his children. And this is according to Chazal. The other version would be that according to the Ramban says in Parshas Pinchas, that maybe Levi was much older, right, when he gave birth, and Yocheved was younger. But why? So therefore it's not an Eis Golo, it's not an open miracle, except because she could have given birth when she was younger. Levi could have had her when she was younger, but it was extended because it wasn't the time for the Kates for the Gula. So because it wasn't the time for the Gula, Kodesh Baruch Hu had to stretch it out. But really she could have given birth. Avram could not have given birth before. There was a physical deficiency. Either Avram and Sarah. So that's the Chiddush. So in other words, the point of it being, but the bottom line is, so why is it mentioned? Not because of old age. It's mentioned because God had to change the Teva. And which kind of miracles are mentioned? When God promises they will come, prophesies they will come either through a Navi or an angel, and it's a miracle that changes the impossibility to become possible. Not simply tweaks nature. So because Avram and Sarah could not have children, and God promised it to them through the angels, so therefore the Torah records it. Yocheved could have been born much earlier. The fact that Yocheved was delayed, or the fact that Moshe was delayed in being born, was because to make sure the Gula came out when it did. So that's not a miracle that's got to be recorded.
But when we find that the Israelites had to remain slaves for 400 years.
So that goes back to Avram. That goes back
But
to
then they were only slaves for 210 years.
Right.
So how did that period?
So that because they were not necessarily, they did not own Israel. So it's viewed ger be'eretz lo lahem, in the land of not theirs. They did not control Israel from the time of the promise of Avram.
But Hashem changed that, right?
Hashem interprets it, reinterprets
So he could have
it.
done the same thing.
He could have, But this was the amount of time that he didn't want to change. But the key principle here, and it's a very important yesod, that God's miracles are not all recorded in the Bible. The life of the Jewish people is a life full of miracles. If we could write a book of every miracle to the Jewish people, it would be a long encyclopedia. Right? Okay?
I'm not sure where the line is drawn between, like he's almost saying like every miracle is teva.
He's saying every teva is a miracle.
Yeah.
Every teva, what is
so in other words, okay, so
he's saying the life of the Jewish people is a miracle.
Right.
That's right.
He said,
but the life of any person, like any, is a miracle.
Yeah.
Like or a tree growing from a seed is a miracle, but it's teva.
He's actually saying something more. He's saying the life of the Jewish people, which is related to doing mitzvot. If we do mitzvahs, we're successful. We don't do mitzvahs, we're not successful. That itself breaks with nature. By nature, people live like animals. By nature, we just live in a world. We have mitzvot that kind of impact upon the success of the Jewish people. The reason the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, the first temple is destroyed, is because we didn't follow the mitzvot. We worshipped idols. That's not nature. Nature says we just were not good soldiers. Unnatural miracles say that we didn't follow God's Torah, we left God and worshipped idols, that God punished it and threw us out of the land of Israel. So the whole idea of reward and punishment and keeping mitzvot and a life that's based upon mitzvot and a life that's connected to God and how that plays out is a miracle in itself. It's one. That's one value. The second thing that he says, the only miracles that the Torah goes out of its way to underscore and point out are ones that A, are been predicted by a Navi or by an angel, and B, are miracles that really break with nature. So the Yocheved miracle doesn't break with nature. There are many women that are old. Okay, so she's not every woman gives birth, not every woman is 130. But as long as she could maintain her menstrual cycle, she could give birth. She has this gene that's longevity. We call it a gene today. The miracle for Avram and Sarah was not only that it was predicted, but they couldn't give birth. There was something missing, something deficient in their inability to conceive and give birth. So it becomes a real miracle, Neis because the system wasn't built to function in a way to reproduce. Okay? Good.
So in fact, the 20-year-old who couldn't give birth, who gives birth.
Yeah, right. Yes. Okay. And in fact, that's why when Rivka gives birth, right, they pray to God, and God says, Shnei goyim b'vitneach, there's a prediction, right? And then it's mentioned that it goes out of its way to say that she has this unusual delivery, right? There's a miracle. Once Chazal say that Rivka did not have a womb. That's why she has the miracle of going to see Vateach l'dvoshet Hashem says that this is what they had to pray. She's not Kara. She had no womb, and she conceives, it is a miracle, and the Torah refers to it.
How is that possible?
That she doesn't have a womb?
No, the fact that she's able to have a child.